Okay, I think we can get started. We are 1 minute past the hour. So I think now it's 2 minutes. So I think this is a good time to start. So hope you can all hear me all right and see me all right. Um, so first of all, hello everyone. My name is Yashis. Today I'll be doing a short sort of session or question answer round on data structures, but for interviews. So some information about this session, right? First of all, please feel free to turn on your videos and interact, right? I would love it if you can do that, but if you're shy to do that, no worries. During the session, you can stay muted, and in between, if you have any questions at any point in time, please feel free to unmute yourself, speak up, and ask the question then and there, and we can get it clarified. Um, but yeah, if you don't want to unmute and speak, you are more than welcome to drop your questions or comments in the chat, and I will pick them up at the end of the session. All right. I think there is some question in the chat. Okay, no, not yet. Okay, great. So that's about the session. Um, so now coming to what we're going to be looking at today. So we're just going to be getting a sneak peek into data structures. So I have done a few sessions before on data structures, but this time I wanted to take a slightly different approach and make it a little more practical, a little more hands-on into what you will actually be seeing when you try to use data structures for preparing for interviews, right? And when I talk about interviews, I am talking about technical interviews, right? Okay, so let's get started. So before we jump right into what is the topic for today, I'll just take a minute to introduce myself to all of you. As I said, my name is Yashis. I have a Bachelor of Engineering degree in Computer Science from BMS College of Engineering, Bangalore, where I graduated from in 2020. In between, in undergrad, I was interning for about 2 months at IBM as a developer. I after that I worked for Dansky IT for about a year as a full stack developer, and then I switched over to SAP Labs India, where I was working for about a year. Um, this has mostly been in the full stack domain. I've worked on tech like Angular, Node.js, Java. And following my experience at SAP, I decided to pursue my master's at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. So I'm doing a master's program which is mostly focused in the analytics domain. It's called information management. So after full stack, I just want to delve a little bit more into data and analytics. And this program sort of teaches more core concepts like Python, R, SQL, Tableau, Power BI, these kinds of things. So that's what I'm doing right now, and I'm also interning part time as a developer for SAP here in the US as well. So that's a little bit about me. So before we jump in and get started, I have done this in the previous two sessions as well, but I want to hear from you guys. What do you know about big data structures? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the word data structures? It need not be right. We are all here to learn. So whatever ideas you have to share, you can feel free to unmute, speak up, and tell me what you think about data structures. You can also drop it in the chat if you don't want to unmute, but I would love it if we can have a conversation. So anyone wants to go first? What are data structures? And there's no one right answer. There are different ways to explain what data structures are. Come on, guys. You guys, it's evening for you. I am the one who just woke up here in the US. I'm the one who should be a little groggy. But anyways, that's all right. So data structures, let's see if yes, I do see some comments in the chat. So Vaibhav says it's a way of organizing data. Vaibhav, you're absolutely right. It is a way of organizing data. Um, data structures, right? Like the name suggests, it's a way or a method that you can use to sort of structure and organize data in a computer, right? Um, Way of representing things in a computer, yes, that is sort of what it is, right? So I like to think of data structures a lot of times. Yes, we also have someone saying retrieving and storing data. Yes, those are two very important operations or functionalities we do when we deal with data structures, right? A lot of times when we're studying data structures, we'll look at how the data is stored and how the data is retrieved, right? And we'll also look at things like search, right? How fast data can be searched, how do we do an insert operation, how do we do a delete operation. These kinds of things is also what we look at. Okay. Oh, okay. So you can unmute yourselves. Okay. Um, thanks for letting me know about that, Rishabh. No worries. We can use the chat to interact, right? Um, yes. But yeah, thanks for letting me know about that. I think that's just a setting in Google Meet. Yeah. Um, yeah, so data structures, as I was saying, is a way that we can store and organize data in the system, right? Um, so I like to think of a lot of times with this analogy of a filing cabinet, right? A filing cabinet is a way in which you basically store and organize files, right? And there can be a specific manner in which you store the files. So maybe you decide to store it in alphabetical order, or maybe you want to store it in chronological or reverse chronological. The same way, data in data structures is stored in a specific manner so that the operation that you are trying to perform with that data is easier, right? So you will have different sort of purposes of different data structures, right? Let's say that you want to build a data structure such that you're able to access the elements very quickly. Let's say you want to search for an element really quickly. Then something like a hash table works better, right? Because it works in something called O of 1 times complexity. If you've dealt a little bit with time complexity, you'll know that it means that we have constant time complexity. If you were confused about what I'm talking about, that's all right, right? Just try to get as much information as possible from this session, and you can always go back, talk to the team at IntrnForte, and check out their data structures course for more details on the technicalities of data structures, right? But I just want to take this opportunity to, in this session, to sort of delve in, touch some topics, and sort of pique your interest in this so that you can go back and read more about data structures, right? So that's what data structures is about. And what we're going to be doing today is going to be slightly different, right? So I wanted it to be more hands on. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to solve a question on data structures together on lead code, right? So it's something very simple, right? But we're going to try to do this together. And before that, I just wanted to introduce you guys to this really cool resource that I found online, right? So this is called Grind 75. So whenever you're preparing for technical interviews, I would really recommend this resource, right? So what this helps you do is you can select the difficulty level of the questions that you want to solve on lead code. So again, if you don't know what lead code is, or if you're hearing about lead code for the first time, it's basically a coding platform, right? So if you've used things like HackerRank, HackerEarth before, lead code is one such platform. Um, I really like it. I think the problems on this platform are really good, and yeah, this is my go-to platform for practicing coding. You can use other platforms like HackerRank and so on, but I just like using LeetCode. And if you invest in the premium version, you will see that there is also an option where you can see which companies. Asked which questions, right? So let's say that you're interviewing for Amazon, right? So you can just click on the Amazon lead code tag and see which questions were frequently asked by Amazon. So you can say, let's say I want to see in the last 6 months what were the most frequently asked questions by Amazon. I can do that. So questions like length of the longest valid substring, count number of k big indices, these are the ones which have been asked most frequently in the last 6 months by Amazon. Right. So lead code premium is also really cool if you want to invest in that. Um, yeah. So basically this particular website lets you create a training plan for lead code, for solving lead code questions, right? If you're someone who already does lead code regularly, great, awesome, you're on the right track, right, for technical interviews. But if you're new to this, don't worry about it, right? We can help you get started, and this website particularly can help you get started. So here you can configure a sort of schedule and number of hours you want to invest per week in practicing lead code. So let's say that I have an interview coming up in 3 weeks, right? um, so then I will say that I want to sort of practice a couple of questions in 3 weeks, and let's say I want to invest 40 hours per week, and let's say I want to focus on medium and hard questions. Then this sort of creates a plan for me where it tells me solve these 44 questions in week one, then week two, then week three. So it will create a study plan for me, right? And these link to basically questions on lead code. So this is a link to a question on lead code where if I open it in another tab, it opens that question on lead code. That's why I really love it. And then once you're done with that question, you can sort of put a check mark and say, hey, I'm done. And you when you have the um, list of things that you have done and checked, that's always a really good feeling, right? And you can also see the topics that you want to cover, right? So let's say that you are so again, this is where data structures come into play. Let's say that you want to focus a little bit on the array data structure, solving questions related to arrays, right? Then you will have an array tag here. Or let's say that you want to focus on solving questions related to graphs, right? Then you can focus on the graph questions with the graph tag, right? So what I would suggest for technical interviews is that pick one particular topic, right? um, and sort of get better at it, right? So let's say that you pick graph, really get better at it, and then solve like a bunch of questions on it, let's say 5 or 10 questions. And once you feel confident about graphs, then you can move on to another data structure, say queue or linked list, right? um, or trees. And you can also do the same with different algorithms, right? So DP or dynamic programming is another very important pattern of questions. So you can also solve a bunch of questions related to DP, and then you can also solve a bunch of questions related to recursion, right? So that's also important pattern or algorithm that is asked a lot of times, right? So you can divide it up in this way, create your own study plan or follow the study plan such that you touch upon different data structures, different algorithms, because hey, again, in the interview, right, they can basically ask you anything, right? But what will prepare you is practice, right? Obviously practice always makes you better. All right. So on that note, let's do some practice live, right? Let's see what it would be like to solve a question on lead code for potentially an interview, right? So I'm just going to walk through this question and present the solution. So if you're someone who already knows how to code, so this is going to be a little hands-on and it's going to be code intensive. So if you already know how to code, and I'm going to be using the Python programming language. So if you already know this, how to code in it, great, you can follow along. If you're new to this, that's really all right. It's okay. You can take baby steps and to um, get to understanding what I'm explaining, right? You can always go back and check out the question on your own, or check out the course, online material on data structures, right? And sort of try to understand what I just did here, right? So, but let's still take this opportunity to sort of see how you can go about solving a question um, on data structures, right? So let me read this question. So this says, given an array of integers temperatures, which represents the daily temperatures, Return an array answer such that answer of I is the number of days you have to wait after the ith day to get a warmer temperature. If there is no future day for which this is possible, return or rather keep answer of I is zero. Okay. So what they're saying is, let's say we're given, let's take a simple example, right? Let's look at this. So let's say that we are given an array of temperatures 30, 40, 50, 60. They're saying for each day we have to find after how many days do we get a warmer temperature, meaning that if the temperature today was 30 Fahrenheit, right, we have to see after how many days do we get a temperature more than 30 Fahrenheit, right? So the keyword here is warmer, right? So they are trying to say that we have to find the number of days that pass after which we get a warmer temperature or a temperature greater than 30. Okay, it's not greater than or equal to 30, it is greater than 30, right? So that is one key point. Next thing that they say is, if we find that we run out of the array and there has been no day where we have gotten a warmer temperature, right, then we keep answer of I as zero. So we have to basically return an array, or in Python a list, right, which represents the number of days we have to wait after each day for which we are given the temperature, right, in order to get a warmer temperature, right? So what we have to return, right, would be an array of the same size as the input temperatures, right? So let me just create an object for me initially that I can return. So I'm going to say answer equals 0 for I in range of temperatures, right? So again, if this is something that's a little new to you, that's really all right. Try to follow along and see if you can understand, or follow the direction which I'm talking. If this is something you're already familiar with, great, that's amazing, right? So we're going to create an array answer, right? And we are initializing this as 0 for all elements, because by default they're saying that, hey, if you don't find a warmer temperature, just return 0, right? So we're going to say that, let me just create an array or list, right, where each element is 0 with the same size as temperatures, because I have to return the number of days it takes for each temperature given, right, to get a warmer temperature. Okay, now before I write the rest of the logic, let's take a pause and think about what they're actually asking us. So, what they're asking us here is, they're saying, given a bunch of temperatures, find after how many days we get a warmer temperature, right? Meaning that we have the temperature 30, we have to keep 30 in mind and say, okay, after how many days do I get a temperature warmer than 30? So then I see 40, right? 40 is greater than 30. So it just took me one day, right? Each element represents a span of one day. It just took me one day to get a warmer temperature. Then 40 to 50, it just took me one day. 50 to 60, it took me just one day, right? Now let's try to look at a different example. For example, this one, right? So here, if we see the temperature 71, right? After 71, we have 69, which is not warmer, but then we have 72, which is warmer, right? So in this case, it took me 2 hops or 2 days to get a warmer temperature. That's why the index corresponding to 71 is 2, right? So now what we notice here is that what we're doing is, at each point we have to keep track of the previous temperatures as well, right? So apart from the current temperature, we have to know what were the previous temperatures, so that we know when we got a warmer temperature than a previous temperature, right? And one very good approach to solve this would be using a stack, right? So we can use a stack to keep pushing elements, right? And once we encounter a temperature which is warmer, right, then we basically remove those elements from the stack for which the temperature is warmer, and use the difference between the indices as a result, right? If what I just said went right through your head, that's totally fine. I'm going to take a moment to write the code for it, and then maybe it's going to make a little more sense after that, right? So I'm just going to talk along as I write my logic, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a stack. So in order to use a stack, I'm just going to create a list in Python, right? Um, and what I have to do in this case, right, is I have to loop through all the temperatures, right? So I'm going to say for I in range of then of temperatures, right? So for each temperature, what I'm doing, what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be checking if I can find a temperature that is warmer than the current temperature at the top of the stack. If I do find a temperature that is warmer and the current temperature at the top of the stack, right, what I will do is I will take the index that I am at right now and the index at which I had a warmer temperature, and that will be the number of days that it took to get that warmer temperature. That means my stack has to store two things, right? My stack has to store a temperature, and my stack also has to store an index, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that part first, where I say stack has to store a temperature, right, and it has to store an index. All right. So we have two we have a pair of elements which is present in our stack, which is the temperature, current temperature, and an index which is present, right? Now what I have to do for every temperature that I encounter, I have to check if the element at the top of the stack is less than the temperature I encounter. While it is less than, that means it's a warmer temperature, and that means we can find the difference between the current index and the temperature or the day that we got before. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a while loop and say while temperature. Okay, so I'm just going to say while temperatures of I, right, is greater than, right, what is on my stack, the last element on my stack. Okay, so this is, I don't need this. Okay, so I'm just gonna write a while loop. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying that while the current temperature is greater than what is on top of the stack, basically that's a warmer temperature for all of those days that I encountered. So what I have to do is I have to change res of I, right, as I, which is the current index, minus what is on top of the stack and the second element here, which represents my index. Okay, what I just did here is, let's say that I encounter a warmer temperature, right, on day index 1, right? So then I see that 40 is greater than what is already in the stack, which is 30, right? Initially 30 will be present into the stack, and then 40, because 40 is greater than 30, I will say that at index 0, right, which is the temperature that I have here. Okay, so this actually should not be res of I, it should be res of the index, which is on top of my stack, right? So I'm going to say that the this answer array or the resulting array, I'm going to change the day at st of -1 of 1, which is the day on top of the stack, and the second element for that, I'm going to change it to the current index minus what is already on the stack, right? So that's the number of days that it takes me, right, to get a warmer temperature. All right, so that's what I'm going to do in this case. And there's also another condition that I need, right? So what if the stack is empty, right? So while length of temperatures is not equal to 0. If my stack is empty, then I should not be doing this operation at all, because here I'm going to get an error in that case. All right. So this is what I have to do. And once I'm able to calculate and change the value for my particular index, what I can do is go ahead and delete that element from the stack, right? Because I don't need to keep track of it anymore, right? So I will keep looping through, and as long as um, I keep finding warmer temperatures than what is in the stack, I will update the answer array, right? So in this case, for example, let's say that I look at the index 75, right? So I see 73 to I have 73 in the stack, and then I see 74. So it took 1 day. 75 to 74 took 1 day, right? Then 71, when I put it in the stack, it is just going to stay as 71 for now, because 69 is lesser than that. So in that operation, I don't remove anything from the stack. Then I see 72, which is present in the stack. So in that case, I will it is warmer than 69, so I'll be removing that and updating 69's index to 1, and then 71's to 2, right? So that's how I have to perform sort of these operations. And then, for example, if we look at 75, it takes me 1, 2, 3, 4 days to get there. So only when I encounter 76, then this 75 is going to be removed from the stack, right? So, and the beauty about using a stack is that always we're going to have an element. So we're going to keep removing until we find a temperature that is lesser than the temperature that we encounter, right? So until, as long as we have temperatures which are greater than what is on the stack, we're going to keep removing it because it is a warmer temperature. All right. So that is going to be my approach. And I'm just going to go ahead and return an answer, which is my answer. And then let's try running this code. Okay, let's see. Sorry about that. There should be range of length of temperatures. My length. Okay, so let's look at what error we're getting here. So it says that list index out of range for the stack, right? So that is because I have checked here while length of temperatures is not equal to 0, but I'm supposed to check while stack length is not 0, right? So I'm supposed to perform this operation as long as there is at least one element which is present in my stack. So now let's try running this again, and this time we do see that it executes, right? And we do see that we get the correct answer, right? So this is a very small piece of logic. It looks like a very complicated question, but when we break it down, it just boils down to using stack operations. All right. So this is a sort of logic that we can use to be able to translate and understand that given a question, hey, I want to use the stack data structure, because in this case, what I'm doing is I have to keep track of the previous temperatures, and every time I get a warmer temperature, I have to remove all the colder temperatures or lesser temperatures from the stack, right? So sort of to be able to translate that in order to use stack data structure for this question, that takes a little bit of practice and time to sort of wrap your head around, and that's really okay, right? As soon as you see a question, it's not going to maybe jump out to you, and you're not going to be like, oh, this is definitely a stack question, this is a tree question, right? You will get there, but that will happen eventually. Sometimes I can see the data structure that is behind a question as soon as I read it, but sometimes I can't either, right? So it takes a lot of practice to get there. So if you can't see yet what data structure to use when you look at a question, that's okay. That just means you're on the right track. That just means you need a little more practice, and then you'll be able to see the data structure behind a particular question, right? Just like in this case, we used a stack data structure to solve this question. Okay, so that's a little bit about how you can approach data structures for interviewing. So that's all I had planned. Again, if this was a little coding heavy, coding intensive for you, that's really okay. Okay, you can always go back, look at the recording again. You can check out the data structures course by IntrnForte, or you can check out other programming courses, right? That they have, and sort of build up your foundation and then get back to this, right? So that's all I had. Now I'll be happy to take any questions that you guys have for me. So I think there is a little bit of trouble with the unmuting part. So I'm just going to be taking questions from the chat today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat, and we can discuss it. And we can just talk for a while about any questions. Okay, so can you code in C++ or Java? So, yes, so the choice of programming language is really up to you, right? So when I was in college, right, in 2019, when I was attending my placement interviews, back then Python was not as common as it is today in coding, like, the first rounds. um, so a lot of companies didn't allow you to use Python. They had it mandatory that either you have to use C++ or Java. But right now, at least in the job market, it's you can use Python. It's pretty chill. But if you're more comfortable with C++ and Java, go for it. I like using Python a lot of times because it's not very verbose. As you can see, I can just take a question and write, code in just a couple of lines. The same code I think I have written in Java a while back, so I can show you. It takes a lot more lines of code to write the same logic in Java. See, so this would be the logic in Java, right? So it's way more lines of code. So, but yeah, if you're comfortable with that, sure. So it really depends on what you're comfortable with. But I would suggest pick one programming language and practice using that so that you keep getting better at it and you can use that in your interviews, right? So Agya has a similar question. Which programming language is the best? Agya, I would really say that there's no such thing as a best programming language. It depends on your preference. But I would definitely suggest that if you're new to CS, start by learning C++ or Java, right? And then learn Python. I think C++, Java are pretty foundational. I think it's important to learn at least one of these, right? And then you can invest your time in learning a very high level language like Python, which basically simplifies your job, makes it very easy to write code. We're done using Stack. Yes, Komal, you're right. I think that was about the question. Java is the most okay. Okay. Um, I think Prince has a more generic question for advice for college students. How do you motivate them? I would say that motivation is something that you have to get from inside, right? The only thing that you can do is sort of remind students about their motivation, to find their own motivation, right? And to sort of consistently, I'm assuming you're talking about motivation for practicing for technical interviews, right? So it just has to be that you have to remind them that the only way they can succeed at technical interviews is through practice, um, and then there is no shortcut to that, right? Okay. Oh, sorry, it was it. I hope you were still able to see the code. If anyone was not able to see the code that I was writing, I will just zoom in a little bit so you can check out the code now, right? And yeah, hopefully if you were not able to see any part of the code earlier, it's visible now, right? So yeah, anyways, there's a standard question as well. I can drop this in the chat and you can check it out. Oh yeah, there's this really cool part in lead code called solutions as well, where you can see, so if you have premium you can see the official solution, otherwise you can see people who have posted their solutions. And a lot of times you'll find that there are some very different innovative solutions that maybe you wouldn't have thought about, right? JavaScript is Java for internship. So I'm assuming, so this question can be with respect to interviewing and what you use on the job, right? I'm not sure, Tarian, what was your exact question about, but let me just take it for both, right? For interviewing, I have not seen a lot of people use JavaScript, but if that's what you're comfortable with, if that's what you are confident in, sure, go for it. Because that's what matters, right? So when you are writing a piece of logic, when you're writing code to solve a question, right? So the most important thing is you need to be a master of that language, right? For example, if I ask you to write an essay in a language of your choice, you might choose your mother tongue, right? Because you're comfortable with it, right? Or if you want to speak a speech in your language of choice, you might choose your to speak in your mother tongue, right? Or if you're comfortable with English, because most of us study it since we're kids, you may choose that, right? So the same way with respect to lead code, choose a language that you have a lot of practice in, that you're very comfortable with, so that you don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about the syntax or the methods in the language, and you can focus more on the core logic of the code that you're writing, right? Because that's what matters. um, but yeah, basically whatever language you're comfortable with is whatever language you're more practiced in is what you should go for. With respect to what you would use in your internship, that would really depend on the role. I would say that yes, JavaScript, you do have a lot of front end frameworks on that. If you're doing full stack, for example, you have React, which is based on JavaScript that you'll use, but you also have back end like frameworks like Node.js, right? Which are based off of JavaScript, and you can also use Java for backend, right? So learning both of these helps, right? Definitely for a job, right? For the skills on the job. But for interviewing and for technical interviews, the language in which you write code, that's really up to you, right? um, how to balance coding and college? Good question, Shreya. I would really suggest make a plan, invest some time every day. Even I find it difficult sometimes to sort of give time to both of these, and a lot of times it ends up happening, oh, there's an interview coming up, let me just grind lead code, right? But that's not how it should be. Ideally, you should spend a good amount of time every week, right? Invest maybe 5 to 6 hours every week on lead code and slowly build up your skills, because it takes time, right? You won't get better at coding, at solving questions on lead code overnight. Only when you keep doing questions every week for months together, you will start to see some change. That you'll be able to look at a question and say, hey, this is stack data structure, hey, this is tree data structure, right? So I would say it takes time, but define a certain number of hours every week to invest in coding and make sure you stick to it, right? Just like you have your own personal time for watching shows or going out with friends, make it a point to have some reserved time to practice lead code as well. um Shahid, yeah, I would really say that you can it's never too early to start building your coding skills and sort of trying to do internship training, right? um, yeah, so definitely use the opportunities that you have early on to start building your skills. Of course, your subjects, your coursework are first priority, but as soon as you get some time from that, do try to invest some time early on, um, in sort of building your skills, getting better at lead code, right? Which language is most preferred by freshers? So, okay. See, the language that you code in, I'll tell you most, again, as I said, it depends on what you're comfortable with, but most people will either code in technical interviews in C++ or Java or Python. Okay, these are the three most common languages, right? Now, with respect to what is sought out by companies for their work, that really depends on the company, right? That really depends on the company, what work they do, the role you're applying for, right? Some companies, for example, use Angular for front end, some use React, right? Some companies use Java for back end, some of them use Node.js, right? Some of them use just core Java or frameworks like Spring Boot. Some of them, again, if you're doing a little, so this is all with respect to full stack. Let's say you're doing an analytics role, right? If it's an analytics job, Python is very important, right? You may not ever use Java, C++ if it's an analytics role, then you'll only end up using Python, right? Some companies use Golang as well. So it really depends on the role and the company, right? So I would say depending on that, you can sort of build up that language skill set. But then again, it's not like companies expect you to, if they use, let's say, Golang, right? Which is not as common, not as many people know Golang as Java or Python, right? But companies won't expect you to know Golang when they interview you, right? If you know it, that's great, but that's not an expectation all the time, right? A lot of times they will, if they use a language or framework, they understand that the skills are transferable. So if you know C++, Java, or Python very well, and you can write beautiful code and solve lead code problems on that, then they know that you will be able to learn the language that the company uses in no time, right? Of course, having experience in the same language that you're applying for a role or the company does is always helpful. But as a fresher, that's very difficult to do because you have very limited work experience, and maybe right from internships, right? So you don't really have a defined language that you are proficient at, right? And that can also work out in your favor because that shows companies that, hey, I'm open to learning new languages, right? And a lot of times that's what companies look for in freshers. They don't expect you to come with, all the knowledge about some language that most people have never heard of that the company uses. They just expect you to come with the right foundation skills in data structures, algorithms, because language can also always be learned. All right. Um, okay, sorry, I think I missed. Which question prefer Java develop? Which companies prefer? So, so this would be a very open-ended question, Aditya. I would say that it there are a lot of companies which use Java. Java is a pretty commonly used framework for the backend. Um, so yeah, I do not have a list of defined companies for you. There are just a lot of companies that do use Java. It's pretty common. That's what you probably need to know. Yeah. Okay. Um, let's see which names. So cybersecurity. So I think cybersecurity, a lot of engineers use Python and Java. So I'm not someone who's very well versed with cybersecurity, but as far as I've heard, Python and Java are pretty common. And cybersecurity is something that has to be ensured for every system, right? So even if you have a system built in C++, you will need some security for that. And if you have a system in Java or Python, you will need um, a security for that, right? So I think the more important thing about cybersecurity will be the concepts that you learn, because you will have to translate those concepts into whatever language the system that you're building is in, right? And again, that depends on the company and the role again. So I would say, if you're looking for cybersecurity, it's the same advice. You can go with the common programming languages, or if you're comfortable with something else, go for that. But I would say what matters more is the concepts. If you're looking at something like cybersecurity, I don't think there's a defined language like analytics, for example. Python is a go-to language. You have to know Python if you want to get into analytics, right? I don't think it's like that for cybersecurity. It would more be conceptual and being able to apply those concepts in any language that the system is built on. Which language should I use for Microsoft? Supriya, I'm not sure if I understand your questions, but in case you're asking to apply for Microsoft, same advice. I would say go with the language that you're most comfortable with. If you're starting from scratch, you can, go with the most common C++, Java, or Python. These are pretty the most common languages, or you can go with something else if that's what you're more comfortable with. Before going for startup, yeah, Gaurav, I would just say that with respect to startups, it's the problem with um, or rather the opportunity that is presented in startups is that you will have to do the work of probably multiple people that you will end up doing. So if there is if five people, or let's say if three people do the work in a big tech company, right? Maybe one person does that work in startup, and that's amazing because you get to learn so much. You get to build. So if you have a defined full stack developer and a database developer, an analytics developer in a big tech company, right? All those three things may be done by a single guy in single person in a startup, right? So that helps you get a lot more skills, right? um, for interviewing for startups, I would say that it's important to show that you are open to taking up a lot, a work in a lot of domains, right? And that you're open to learning new things because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for someone who's able to be hands-on multiple parts of the project, right? Because finally, at the end of the day, it's lesser number of people, right? So being open to learning is I think one of the most important things that you should show if you're interviewing for a startup. Best coding platform. So I prefer Lead Code, personally, Vibe. Again, it depends on your personal preference. I usually prefer Lead Code, and it's one of the most commonly used. But there are others like HackerRank is also pretty common. Supriya, how do you attempt the question? So I would say that initially, if you're very new to lead code, try to spend some time to solve the question. Really try to think hard and think, um, can I solve this question on my own? Right? It may take you half an hour or an hour, and always start with easy questions if you're new to lead code. Spend like half an hour or an hour on it, or maximum like 1.5 hours. But if you still can't solve it, then look at the solution, understand it, and then come back to it, let's say after a couple of days or after a week, right? So it's okay to not be able to solve a question on lead code, right? But make sure that you try, because what's important is you spend some time trying to think of your own logic, but don't spend too much time, right? We all don't have a lot of time. Everyone has limited time, right? So if you're not able to solve a question after a while, do look at the solution, understand it, and you can always come back and revisit it, and try to solve it on your own at a later point in time, right? But ideally, if you're seeing a question for the second time, right, that time you should be able to write your own logic. Okay, but it's fine to it's really okay to look at the solution, try to understand it, and come back to it later, right? So it's if you're beginning on lead code, it's almost impossible that you'll just be able to solve every kind of question there is on your own without any help for the first time, right? Webhub, yes. I think okay, no worries. You had a technical problem and I answered it, but I think I repeated it a couple of times. I'll just say it again. So usually it's C++, Java, Python, which most people take. Most people learn to do their technical interviews and lead code on. But it's really up to you. It depends on what language you are most comfortable with. So it is a personal choice. But these are the most three common languages. Sought out again by companies, that really depends on the role the company. That's what I sort of elaborated on. And if you want more details on that, we can always connect offline. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and we can talk in detail about that as well. Cybersecurity, yes, I think there are good opportunities that are available, Nayan. Again, really depends on your interest. Anything in tech, there are opportunities available. Prominent language used in front end developer. Okay, Rishit, I would say that for front end development, it's mostly Angular and React that is used. So those are the two most common frameworks. But again, it's again, these skills are transferable, right? As a fresher, if you just show an interest to learn and say that, hey, I can pick up any new technology, a lot of times that will go a long way. If you do have experience in one of, like, Angular, React, these kinds of frameworks, then that's definitely a plus point, right? Database, again, that also depends on the role, the company, right? Some companies use SQL databases, traditional relational databases. Some of them will use non-relational, so they'll use something like MongoDB or Neo4j. So really depends on the kind of work that the company does, the kind of role that you are interviewing for, and that the team is looking for, right? um, there are some common ones, right? Especially in terms of databases, there's SQL, MongoDB, Snowflake is pretty popular now, right? A lot of companies use Postgres, Amazon, RDS, these kinds of databases, right? You can always take a look at some of the popular databases. Let's say, I think there is a website called DB Engines Ranking. I don't know if this is the one. Let's see. Yes, this is the one. So this sort of gives you a ranking of what are the most popular database engines, right? Again, this is just by popularity though. There is no guarantee that the company that you end up working at uses, like, uses a very popular database. That really depends on the work that they do. But if you want some common information, you can do sort of, this kind of Google search and see what are some commonly used databases, right? um Supriya, how can you start web development along with CPP? Yes, you can do that. I'm assuming you're talking about C++. So yes, you can definitely do both web development and C++. I'm really sorry. Give me one moment. It's getting sunny out here. Okay, I think that's better. So yes, you can definitely do web development and C++. It really depends on what your interests are. So if you want to sort of start out with full stack as your career, then I would say yes, you can definitely do web development, and at the side do learn a language like C++ or Java, Python for lead code. Right, so definitely I would say go for it. um Yes, so I would say, Pinky, that if you are someone, as I said, who is not from a computer science background, um, this session was meant to sort of give you a glimpse into what it would be like, or how you can start off with learning about data structures and doing lead code, and practicing problems on lead code, right? How you can approach a problem. So again, it's meant to cater to people who are familiar with coding as well as people who are not. If you're not, that's really fine, right? It just means that you'll have to put in a little bit of work if this is what you want to do in your career, right? You'll have to put in a little bit of work to sort of build up your foundations in coding, and then revisit this. But regardless, this just gives you a glimpse into what to expect. If you want to, let's say, if you're thinking about switching to computer science, or you want to interview for a technical job, this sort of gives you a glimpse into the kind of preparation that you'll have to do or what you'll have to work with, just to get a high level overview or idea, right? If you're not familiar with coding. If you are familiar with coding, then you would have understood every single line of code that I wrote, and the data structures I used. But otherwise, it's sort of to give you an idea into what to expect, right? If you're thinking about taking a technical course by IntrnForte, right? So this is also to give you an idea of what to expect, or how you should prepare if you're heading towards a technical role or technical job at a tech company, right? So yeah, so that's all I have for today, folks. Thank you so much. Hope you learned something new from this session. Right, I'm really looking forward to interacting with you all again. Thank you so much for taking time out today. See you soon.